Before we begin tonight's story, find a comfortable position. Allow your shoulders to soften. Let your breathing become slow and easy. There is nowhere you need to be for a little while. Nothing you need to solve. Tonight, we are simply taking a gentle journey into history. Not to witness a tragedy, not to relive a disaster, but to visit a single peaceful evening, when the largest ship ever built rested quietly beneath a sky full of stars. For just one night, everything was still filled with hope. So let your thoughts drift as gently as calm water, and come aboard. It is the evening of April 9th, 1912. The air along Southampton's docks carries the scent of salt, fresh timber, coal smoke, and the sea. The sun has almost disappeared below the horizon. A cool breeze moves gently across the harbor. The water is unusually calm. Tiny ripples catch the last golden light of the day. Along the dock, workers finish the final preparations for tomorrow's departure. Wooden carts roll slowly over the stone streets. Crates of fresh fruit, fine china, fresh flowers, letters, newspapers, everything needed for a long voyage across the Atlantic. There is no rush, only quiet purpose. Everyone has a job. Everyone believes tomorrow will arrive just as expected. And there, towering above the harbor, stands Titanic. She is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Her four great funnels rise proudly into the evening sky. Her polished hull stretches farther than most people have ever walked without stopping. Thousands of tiny lights begin glowing behind elegant windows. From the dock, the ship feels less like something built by human hands, and more like a floating city. People pause simply to look at her. Even those who have no ticket. Even those with no intention of sailing. Some remove their hats. Others quietly smile. Children point excitedly toward the enormous ship. No photograph, no newspaper illustration, can truly prepare anyone for her size. A young schoolteacher named Eleanor arrives at the dock carrying a small brown suitcase. She is 28 years old. She has never crossed the Atlantic before. Inside her suitcase are neatly folded dresses, a family Bible, a notebook, 2 novels, and a small tin containing photographs of her parents. Her ticket rests safely inside her coat pocket. She checks for it again, then smiles. She has checked at least 10 times already today. Not because she is forgetful. Because tomorrow feels important. She is leaving England to begin a new life in America. The decision has taken years. She has spent countless evenings wondering whether she was brave enough. Now, standing beneath the towering ship, there is no turning back. Surprisingly, she feels calm. Nearby, a young steward carefully polishes a brass handrail until it shines like gold in the fading light. His name is Thomas. He is only 23. This is one of the greatest opportunities of his life. Working aboard the newest and most luxurious ocean liner in the world feels almost unbelievable. His uniform is perfectly pressed. His shoes reflect the lantern light. He quietly checks each detail one final time. Fresh flowers arranged. Cabins prepared. Silver polished. Everything exactly where it belongs. His supervisor walks past with a satisfied nod. Excellent work. Thomas smiles. Simple words. But tonight, they mean everything. As darkness slowly settles over Southampton, the harbor begins changing. Gas lamps flicker to life along the streets. Warm yellow light reflects across the quiet water. The stars appear one by one above the great ship. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell softly marks the passing hour. The sound drifts gently across the harbor. Nothing feels hurried. The evening seems content simply to exist. Eleanor walks slowly along the dock. She passes families saying their goodbyes. A little boy clutches a wooden toy boat. An elderly couple sit quietly together on a bench, sharing roasted chestnuts from a paper bag. 2 musicians laugh while carrying violin cases toward the ship. A gentleman carefully folds tomorrow's newspaper beneath his arm. Every face carries a different story, different hopes, different dreams. Yet tonight, They all share the same destination. A soft piano melody drifts through an open window near the dock offices. Someone is practicing quietly after a long day's work. The music blends beautifully with the gentle sound of waves touching the harbor wall. Eleanor pauses to listen. She closes her eyes for just a moment. It is one of those tiny moments that seems ordinary while it is happening, yet remains unforgettable for the rest of a lifetime. She continues walking until she reaches the gangway leading toward Titanic. A crew member smiles warmly. "Good evening. Boarding begins early tomorrow." Eleanor nods politely. "I know. I simply wanted to see her." The crewman glances proudly toward the great ship. Most people do. For a few quiet moments. They stand together without speaking. Sometimes, silence says enough. Above them, the ship's lights glow brighter against the deep blue evening sky. The polished brass fittings sparkle beneath electric lamps. Fresh paint reflects the moonlight. The enormous vessel seems almost peaceful, like a grand hotel waiting patiently for its first guests. No engines rumble. No whistles sound. Only the quiet creaking of ropes and the gentle movement of water beneath the hull. Across the harbor, small fishing boats return home after the day's work. Compared to Titanic, they appear no larger than toys. Their lanterns dance softly upon the water. The fishermen wave toward friends waiting on the docks. Children run to greet their fathers. Laughter echoes briefly through the evening air. The great ship watches silently over it all. Eleanor finds an empty bench overlooking the harbor. She places her suitcase beside her. From her coat pocket, she removes a small notebook. Opening it carefully, she begins writing. April 9th, 1912. Tomorrow, my new life begins. She pauses for a moment, looking toward Titanic once again, then writes one final sentence before closing the notebook. Tonight, the world feels wonderfully full of possibilities. She smiles quietly, places the notebook away, and watches the moon rise above the peaceful harbor. Far above, the stars continue appearing. One by one, the sea remains calm. The great ship rests quietly at her berth, wrapped in warm light, surrounded by hopeful hearts, waiting for morning, waiting for the journey ahead. And somewhere among the thousands of quiet souls preparing for tomorrow, history is still sleeping peacefully. Morning arrives gently over Southampton. The first rays of sunlight spread across the quiet harbor. The sea glitters like polished glass. A few gulls circle lazily overhead. Along the docks, the city slowly wakes. Shopkeepers lift their shutters. Fresh bread is carried from nearby bakeries. The scent of warm pastries drifts through the cool morning air. Horse-drawn carts rumble over the cobblestones. Steam rises from cups of tea held by dockworkers beginning another day's work. It feels like any other spring morning. Peaceful, hopeful, full of quiet beginnings. Eleanor leaves her small boarding house shortly after sunrise. Her suitcase feels a little heavier today. Not because anything has been added, but because every step carries her farther from the life she has always known. She pauses outside the doorway for one final look. The elderly landlady waves from the window. "Safe travels, dear." Eleanor smiles warmly. "I'll write as soon as I arrive." The woman nods. "I'll be waiting." Simple words, yet they carry all the warmth of home. As Eleanor approaches the harbor once more, Titanic comes into view. In the bright morning light, she appears even larger than before. Sunlight dances across the rows of windows. The polished railings gleam like silver. Crew members move calmly across the decks, making their final preparations. Smoke rises slowly from the funnels, drifting into the clear blue sky. The great ship feels alive now, ready, patiently waiting for her passengers. A long line has already formed near the gangway. Families stand together with trunks, suitcases, hatboxes, and bundles tied carefully with rope. Children clutch their parents' hands. Some travelers talk excitedly about New York. Others quietly study their tickets again and again. A gentleman unfolds a map of America. Two sisters whisper about the shops they hope to visit. An elderly couple simply stand side by side, holding hands. No one seems in a hurry. Everyone understands that some journeys deserve to begin slowly. A cheerful porter tips his cap toward Eleanor. "May I carry your suitcase, miss?" She thanks him and hands it over. The suitcase suddenly seems much lighter. Sometimes, accepting help is its own quiet kind of courage. As they walk together toward the gangway, the porter smiles. "First voyage?" "It is. You'll remember it forever." She smiles. "I hope so." The gangway rises gently toward the ship. Each wooden step echoes softly beneath polished shoes and sturdy boots. As Eleanor reaches the top, she pauses for just a moment. Before her stands one of the grand entrances to Titanic. Rich wood panels, brass fixtures shining in the morning sun, white painted walls so fresh they seem to glow. A steward welcomes every guest with calm professionalism. "Good morning. Welcome aboard." His voice is warm, never hurried. Every passenger receives the same smile, no matter which ticket they hold. Stepping inside, Eleanor finds herself surrounded by quiet elegance. The entrance hall feels more like a fine hotel than a ship. Soft carpets cushion every footstep. Crystal light fixtures sparkle overhead. Fresh flowers fill elegant vases placed along polished tables. The air carries the faint scent of beeswax polish, clean linen, and newly cut roses. Everything is spotless. Every detail carefully arranged. It is difficult to imagine that thousands of people will soon call this floating palace home. A steward checks her ticket. "Cabin D34. He smiles. "If you'll follow the signs, miss, you'll find it quite easily." She thanks him. Then begins exploring at an unhurried pace. Wide hallways stretch in every direction. Beautiful carved wood decorates the walls. Large windows allow streams of golden morning light to pour inside. Some passengers stop simply to admire the craftsmanship. Others quietly touch the polished handrails, as though confirming the ship is real. As Eleanor reaches the famous grand staircase, she stops completely. For a long moment, she forgets to breathe. The staircase rises gracefully through the center of the ship. Its oak banisters curve with effortless elegance. A magnificent glass dome above allows sunlight to spill down like liquid gold. An ornate clock stands proudly at the landing. Its hands move quietly, patiently, marking the beginning of a remarkable journey. Fresh flowers fill the air with a gentle fragrance. The polished wood reflects the morning light beautifully. People climb the staircase slowly, almost respectfully. No one wishes to rush through such beauty. Eleanor rests one hand lightly on the smooth banister. It feels warm beneath her fingertips. She smiles. She has visited grand buildings before. Museums, libraries, old churches. Yet this feels different. Because everything around her is moving. The staircase belongs to a ship. A place built not to stand still, but to carry dreams across an ocean. Nearby, a little girl wearing a pale blue dress gazes upward with wide eyes. Her father kneels beside her. "What do you think?" She whispers. "It looks like a palace." He smiles. "I think you're right." Their quiet laughter echoes gently through the hall. Several nearby passengers smile without saying a word. Moments of shared wonder require no introduction. Eleanor continues her gentle walk through the ship. She passes the reading room. Its shelves already hold carefully arranged books. Comfortable armchairs sit beside large windows. Everything invites quiet conversation and peaceful afternoons. Further along, she discovers a writing room. Elegant desks stand ready with fresh paper and envelopes. She imagines travelers writing letters home while watching endless blue water drift past the windows. Perhaps she will write one herself. The dining saloon is equally breathtaking. Long tables are dressed in crisp white linen. Silver cutlery catches the light. Crystal glasses sparkle softly. Staff members place the final touches on floral arrangements. The room is silent now. Yet somehow, It already feels filled with future conversations. Laughter. Celebrations. New friendships waiting to begin. Thomas, the young steward, notices Eleanor admiring the room. He approaches with an easy smile. Beautiful, isn't it? She nods. I've never seen anything like it. He looks around proudly. Neither have I. For a moment. They simply stand together in quiet appreciation. Sometimes, beauty asks for nothing more than our attention. As the morning continues, more passengers arrive. The gentle sounds of conversation drift through the corridors. Suitcases roll softly across polished floors. A violinist quietly tunes his instrument in preparation for the evening. Somewhere, a pianist tests a few gentle notes. The melodies float through the ship. Light as spring air, Titanic is no longer just a remarkable vessel. She has become a small floating town, filled with thousands of different stories, thousands of different hopes, all beginning together. Eleanor finally reaches her cabin. She opens the door slowly. Sunlight streams through the window. The room is simple, comfortable, neatly prepared. Fresh sheets cover the bed. A small vase holds white flowers. She places her notebook on the bedside table, then walks to the window. Outside, the harbor glistens beneath the morning sun. She watches the gentle movement of the water, takes a slow breath, and smiles. Some journeys begin with excitement. Others begin with quiet gratitude. Perhaps the finest journeys begin with both. By late morning, the harbor had become wonderfully alive. The docks echoed with cheerful conversations. Stewards greeted arriving passengers with calm smiles. Porters carefully guided towering trunks toward waiting cargo lifts. Somewhere nearby, a bell rang softly, not as a warning, simply to mark another peaceful hour. The sunlight rested gently upon the calm water. Every ripple reflected the enormous white hull of Titanic. She stood quietly at her berth. Elegant, confident, patient, almost as though she knew there was no reason to hurry. Eleanor decided to explore before settling into her cabin. She folded her gloves neatly into her handbag, adjusted the brim of her hat, and stepped back into the ship's broad corridors. She had never stayed in a place quite like this. Every hallway invited curiosity. Every polished handrail caught the morning light. Even the smallest details had been crafted with remarkable care. Decorative brass fixtures gleamed. Rich oak panels lined the walls. Soft carpets muffled every footstep. Nothing echoed. Everything felt calm. She wandered toward the promenade deck. As she stepped outside, a cool sea breeze greeted her. The fresh air carried the scent of salt water mixed with freshly painted wood. Far below, small boats drifted peacefully across the harbor. Dockworkers looked almost miniature from this height. Passengers leaned comfortably against the railings. Some admired the view. Others quietly read newspapers beneath the spring sunshine. A gentleman adjusted his camera before carefully photographing his wife beside one of the great lifeboats. Nearby, 2 children counted the seagulls circling overhead. 1, 2, 3. They laughed every time another bird appeared. Eleanor rested her hands upon the polished wooden railing. It felt smooth beneath her fingertips. She looked across Southampton. Church towers rose gently above rows of brick houses. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys. The city looked peaceful from here. Different somehow. Distance had a way of making familiar places appear softer, kinder. She wondered how long it would be before she saw England again. Perhaps years. Perhaps never. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it filled her with quiet gratitude. She had been given an opportunity few people ever received. To begin again. The ship itself seemed to breathe. Not literally, of course. But there was a rhythm to it. The quiet footsteps. The distant voices. The gentle creak of ropes holding the great vessel against the dock. Everything worked together. Like a carefully rehearsed orchestra. No movement was wasted. No one raised their voice. Even the busiest crew members carried themselves with calm confidence. Further along the promenade, a gentleman sat sketching the ship in a leather notebook. His pencil moved slowly across the page, carefully capturing every graceful line. Eleanor paused to admire his work. "It looks beautiful." The man smiled without looking up. "I'm trying." He chuckled softly. "But I'm beginning to think she's too large to fit on one page." Eleanor laughed. "I think you may be right." He finally looked toward her. "The best things usually are." She smiled, wished him a pleasant afternoon, then continued her gentle walk. As noon approached, the ship became a little livelier. The first luncheon service was being prepared. The comforting aroma of fresh bread drifted through nearby corridors. Someone carried a tray filled with polished silver teapots. Another steward carefully arranged fresh flowers in crystal vases. Every detail mattered, not because anyone demanded perfection, but because excellence had quietly become a habit. Eleanor found herself standing outside the ship's library, unable to resist. She stepped inside. The room welcomed her with peaceful silence. Rows of beautifully bound books rested neatly upon polished shelves. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Comfortable leather chairs invited long afternoons of reading. One elderly gentleman sat peacefully in the corner, turning each page with unhurried care. A young woman copied passages from a poetry collection into her journal. Neither seemed aware of the passing time. Eleanor smiled. Libraries had always felt like gentle conversations between strangers, each book patiently waiting for someone to discover it. She selected a volume of travel essays. Not because she planned to finish it, only because holding a book somehow made unfamiliar places feel like home. Settling into a nearby chair, she read quietly for several minutes. Outside the windows, the harbor sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, only the soft turning of pages could be heard. For Eleanor, it was one of the happiest moments of the day. Simple, peaceful, entirely ordinary, yet somehow unforgettable. Eventually, she returned the book to its shelf. A librarian smiled warmly. "I hope you enjoyed it." "I did. I think I enjoyed the room just as much." The librarian laughed gently. "Many people do." Leaving the library, Eleanor noticed a young violinist standing alone near one of the grand staircases. He wasn't performing. He was practicing. His bow moved slowly across the strings. The melody floated softly through the hallway. Gentle, comforting, almost dreamlike. Several passengers paused without speaking. Some closed their eyes for just a moment. Others simply smiled before continuing on their way. Music, Eleanor thought, had a remarkable way of making large places feel wonderfully personal. As afternoon sunlight filled the ship, Thomas continued guiding passengers toward their cabins. His work rarely stopped. Yet he never appeared rushed. He greeted every traveler as though welcoming an old friend. One elderly woman struggled with a heavy handbag. Thomas quietly carried it without being asked. A little boy dropped his toy soldier. Thomas picked it up before the child even noticed. A nervous couple searched for the wrong corridor. Thomas gently walked them all the way to their room. None of these moments lasted longer than a minute. Yet each left behind a smile. Sometimes, kindness required nothing more than paying attention. Near the stern of the ship, Eleanor discovered a row of comfortable wooden deck chairs facing the harbor. Many were still empty. She chose one near the rail, sat comfortably, closed her eyes. The breeze brushed gently across her face. Somewhere nearby, china cups clinked softly against saucers. A steward served afternoon tea. The distant sound of quiet conversation blended with the cries of seabirds. The entire world seemed to slow, as though inviting everyone aboard to breathe just a little more deeply. When Eleanor opened her eyes again, the sun had begun its gentle descent toward the western sky. Golden light washed across the decks. The polished wood glowed warmly. Passengers moved more slowly now, content simply to enjoy the afternoon. There would be time enough for tomorrow. For now, Today was enough. High above, the ship's flags fluttered lazily in the spring breeze. The sea remained calm. The harbor shimmered beneath the warm light. Titanic rested quietly, filled with hope, filled with possibility, and wrapped in the peaceful rhythm of an ordinary afternoon that would live forever in memory. As the afternoon slowly faded, the sunlight softened into warm shades of gold. Long shadows stretched gracefully across the promenade deck. The sea reflected the evening sky like polished glass. The busy sounds from the harbor began to quiet. One by one, the day's tasks were completed. Passengers settled comfortably into the gentle rhythm of life aboard the great ship. There was nowhere to hurry. Nothing demanding immediate attention. Only the quiet pleasure of watching another beautiful day come to an end. Eleanor returned briefly to her cabin. She opened the small wardrobe, carefully selected a navy blue evening dress. Simple, elegant, the sort of dress her mother had helped her choose months earlier. As she fastened the final button, she caught her reflection in the mirror. For a moment, she hardly recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she felt different. There was something peaceful about knowing that tomorrow would begin an entirely new chapter. The uncertainty that had followed her for so many months had quietly disappeared. It had been replaced by something gentler. Hope. Outside, the first lamps around the decks flickered to life. Warm amber light spilled across polished wood. Stewards moved quietly through the corridors, lighting decorative wall lamps one after another. The ship slowly transformed. The bright daylight gave way to a softer world. Everything seemed calmer beneath the glow of evening. Thomas made one final walk through the first-class corridors before dinner. He straightened a picture frame that had shifted slightly, adjusted a vase of white lilies, smoothed the edge of a carpet near the grand staircase. Small details, almost invisible. Yet each one helped create the quiet feeling that everything aboard the ship was exactly as it should be. He paused for a moment beneath the great clock. The staircase looked magnificent. Soft light poured down through the glass dome above. Fresh flowers filled the air with a delicate fragrance. Guests descended the staircase slowly. Ladies in elegant gowns. Gentlemen in neatly pressed evening suits. Quiet conversations echoed gently beneath the high ceiling. Thomas smiled to himself. He knew he would never forget this evening. The dining saloon gradually filled with guests. White tablecloths stretched across long polished tables. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath elegant chandeliers. Silver cutlery reflected the warm candlelight. Fresh roses stood proudly in delicate glass vases. The room glowed with quiet sophistication. Soft conversation drifted through the air. Nothing loud. Nothing hurried. Just hundreds of voices blending into a comforting murmur. Like distant waves upon a peaceful shore. Eleanor found her seat beside a large window. Outside, the harbor shimmered beneath the first stars of evening. A steward gently placed a folded napkin upon her lap. Another poured fresh tea into fine porcelain cups. The aroma of warm bread drifted across the room. Everything felt carefully considered. Every movement graceful. Every smile genuine. Across the table, an elderly gentleman introduced himself. "My name is William." "Eleanor." "A pleasure." "The pleasure is mine." Their conversation unfolded slowly. They spoke about gardens, books, quiet villages, favorite seasons, simple things. Sometimes, the easiest conversations become the most memorable. Elsewhere aboard the ship, the second-class dining room carried a different atmosphere. Children laughed softly while sharing stories about the journey ahead. A young couple quietly planned the little home they hoped to build in America. An elderly widow unfolded a photograph of her grandchildren and smiled as she looked at it. The furnishings were simpler than those in first class. Yet the feeling remained the same. Hope. Expectation. The comforting belief that tomorrow held wonderful possibilities. In third class, families gathered around sturdy wooden tables. Fresh soup warmed cold hands. Bread was passed from person to person. Someone began humming an old Irish folk tune. Another joined quietly. Before long, half the room was singing together. Not as performers, simply as travelers sharing an evening. Their laughter echoed warmly through the corridor. For many, this voyage represented years of saving, years of dreaming, years of waiting. Tonight, those dreams finally felt close enough to touch. As dinner came to a peaceful close, many passengers wandered toward the promenade deck. The evening air had grown cooler. Gentle waves lapped quietly against the ship's hull. The sky above had become a deep velvet blue. Stars appeared one by one, far brighter than they seemed from the city streets. Eleanor wrapped a light shawl around her shoulders. She leaned comfortably against the railing. The harbor lights twinkled in the distance. Somewhere along the shoreline, a church choir rehearsed for the following Sunday. The faint melody drifted across the still water. It reached the ship only as a whisper. Beautiful, gentle, almost dreamlike. Thomas stepped outside for a brief moment between duties. Crew members were rarely able to enjoy long breaks. Yet even a single quiet minute beneath the evening sky felt like a gift. He looked toward the rows of stars overhead. His father had once told him, "When you're far from home, look at the sky. The same stars shine for everyone." Thomas smiled. It was a comforting thought. No matter where tomorrow might lead, the night sky would always remain familiar. A pianist began playing softly in the first-class lounge. The melody drifted through nearby corridors. Guests settled into comfortable armchairs. Some read books. Others played cards. A few simply listened. There was no rush to fill every silence. The quiet moments were welcome. Perhaps they were the most valuable moments of all. Eleanor wandered into the lounge. She chose a chair near one of the large windows. From there, she could see both the harbor and the softly lit room behind her. She opened her notebook once again. Beneath yesterday's entry, she wrote a few more lines. The ship feels less like a machine, and more like a small world filled with strangers who somehow already feel familiar. She paused, listening to the piano, watching reflections dance across the glass. Then she added one final sentence. If every beginning could feel this peaceful, perhaps change would never seem frightening. She gently closed the notebook. As the evening grew later, the corridors gradually became quieter. One by one, cabin doors closed softly. Stewards wished guests a pleasant night. Lights were dimmed. Footsteps became fewer. The great ship seemed to exhale, settling peacefully into the stillness of night. Outside, the moon rose slowly above Southampton Harbor. Its silver light shimmered across the calm water. Titanic rested quietly beneath countless stars. Wrapped in hope, wrapped in possibility, wrapped in the peaceful silence that comes only when tomorrow still feels wonderfully unknown, the evening grew quieter with each passing hour. Throughout the great ship, the last conversations slowly faded. Lounge doors closed softly. Footsteps became fewer. The distant sound of laughter drifted gently through the corridors before disappearing into comfortable silence. Titanic rested peacefully beside Southampton's dock. There would be plenty of time for tomorrow. Tonight, the world seemed content to remain exactly as it was. Eleanor returned to the promenade one last time before bed. The cool spring air welcomed her. She wrapped her shawl a little closer around her shoulders. Above her, the stars stretched from one horizon to the other. Without the bright lights of a modern city, they appeared almost endless. Thousands upon thousands of tiny lights, quietly watching over the sleeping harbor. She rested both hands upon the polished wooden rail. The sea below reflected every star so clearly, it became difficult to tell where the sky ended and the water began. A few other passengers stood nearby. No one spoke. There was no need. Some moments ask only to be shared, not explained. A young couple quietly admired the moon. An elderly gentleman removed his hat for a moment, allowing the cool breeze to brush through his silver hair. A mother gently carried her sleeping daughter back toward their cabin. The little girl's head rested peacefully against her shoulder. Already dreaming. Far below, a harbor watchman slowly walked along the dock carrying an old brass lantern. Its golden light moved steadily through the darkness. One careful step after another. Its reflection shimmered gently across the still water. Somewhere in the distance, a church clock softly chimed 10 times. The sound drifted across the harbor, then slowly faded away, leaving only silence behind. Eleanor took a slow breath. The salty air filled her lungs. She closed her eyes. There was something deeply comforting about standing aboard a ship that had not yet begun its voyage. Everything felt full of possibility. No miles had yet been traveled. No destination had yet been reached. The journey existed only in imagination. Sometimes, the beginning of an adventure carries its own quiet kind of happiness. After a few peaceful minutes, she returned inside. The corridors glowed beneath warm electric lamps. Most cabin doors were now closed. Stewards moved quietly through the hallways, checking that everything was ready for morning. Thomas passed with a gentle smile. "Good evening, miss." "Good evening. I hope you've enjoyed your first day aboard." "I have. More than I expected. I'm very glad." His voice remained warm, unhurried. He tipped his cap politely before continuing down the corridor. Another small kindness. Another moment that would quietly stay in someone's memory. Inside her cabin, Eleanor placed her notebook upon the bedside table. She opened it one final time. Beneath the words she had written throughout the day, she added a final entry. "The ship is peaceful tonight. Everyone I have met carries a different dream. Some hope for a new beginning. Some hope for adventure. Others simply hope to see family once again." She paused, listening to the faint sound of waves touching the hull. Then she smiled and wrote one final sentence. "Whatever tomorrow brings, tonight is beautiful." She gently closed the notebook, blew out the small reading lamp beside her bed, and settled beneath the warm blankets. Outside, the harbor remained perfectly still. Elsewhere aboard Titanic, life slowly drifted toward sleep. In first class, a violin rested quietly inside its velvet case. In second class, two sisters whispered about New York until their voices faded into dreams. In third class, a father carefully tucked a blanket around his young son before sitting beside the small cabin window for a few peaceful moments. In the crew quarters, Thomas carefully removed his uniform jacket. He polished the brass buttons one final time before placing it neatly over a chair. Then he looked through the small round porthole. The moon reflected across the calm water. He smiled. Tomorrow would be another busy day. For now, rest was enough. Across the harbor, the city itself grew quiet. Shop windows became dark. The final tram rolled gently through empty streets. A bakery prepared dough for the morning. A newspaper editor finished tomorrow's front page. Somewhere, a lighthouse cast its steady beam across the entrance to the harbor. The night continued its peaceful rhythm, completely unaware that one of history's most remarkable ships rested quietly nearby. Hours passed gently. Clouds drifted slowly across the moon. The tide rose almost unnoticed. Soft waves brushed against Titanic's great hull. The ropes securing the ship creaked quietly in the night breeze. Everything felt calm, steady, safe. The great vessel seemed almost asleep herself, waiting patiently for the sunrise, waiting for the beginning of a new journey. If you had stood upon the dock that night, you might have noticed nothing extraordinary, only a beautiful ship beneath a sky filled with stars. Warm lights glowing from elegant windows. Gentle music lingering faintly in the air. Passengers resting peacefully after a day of excitement. Crew members preparing carefully for the morning ahead. It would have looked like hope. Perhaps that is why quiet evenings remain so precious. Because they remind us to notice what often goes unseen. The warmth of a light shining through a window. The comfort of familiar voices. The simple joy of taking one slow breath beneath an open sky. Life is made from these small moments. Not because they are dramatic, but because they are gentle. And gentleness has a way of staying with us long after the moment has passed. As our own journey comes softly to an end tonight, allow yourself to imagine Titanic exactly as she was on that peaceful evening, resting quietly beneath countless stars, the harbor calm, the lights glowing warmly, the decks still, the cabins filled with hopeful dreams. For tonight, we leave the ship exactly there, wrapped in moonlight, surrounded by silence, waiting patiently for morning. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening with Moonlight Tales. If this story helped you relax, or brought a little calm to the end of your day, I hope you'll join me again tomorrow night for another gentle journey through history, imagination, and quiet places. Until then, let your thoughts drift as slowly as the evening tide. Let your breathing become soft and easy. May your dreams be peaceful. May your night be restful. And may you always find comfort in the quiet moments that ask for nothing more than to be noticed. Good night.